Right, hello everyone. Funnily enough, I just finished an interview with Siggy, but Brian just messaged me right after that. So I guess I'm doing two interviews in a row. How is it going, man? Long time no see.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's going all right. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I'm actually drinking wine right now, so not doing that bad, I
Nice.
guess.
It's reached that part of the day, yeah. So
Yeah, it's actually pretty late in Czech right now, so I'm just enjoying my time here.
yeah,
So,
it's pretty early here. Sorry.
oh, is it early in States right now?
I mean, it's not that early. It's in the afternoon, early afternoon, but it's way different time still.
Yeah, so basically I had this idea that I was just like kind of bored in Czech, didn't really know what to do. So I was just thinking no one is really doing interviews with all the like famous players, and I actually, I might not be necessarily one of them right now, but I do know all the people, so maybe I can just message them and maybe a lot of them will say yes. And it turned out that I actually thought that like maybe 90% will say no, but it actually the opposite thing happened. Most of them said yes, so now I'm like super busy. I had like 5 interviews a day right now. Because when they say yes, I can't really like say no to them because I was the one approached them to approach them. So that's the reason why I'm making this interview with Brian. Brian, I mean, I think most people watching this video probably know, but he's one of the more famous players. He's the former world champion. He's in the MPL right now. And yeah, but there are probably a lot of people who got into the Magic because of Magic Arena. So like they maybe know that you won the world championship and that you're MPL right now, but then they don't actually remember the days when you were just like the SCG grinder and like trying really hard to even qualify for all the Pro Tours and stuff. Can you maybe like talk about that, because I think that's like a really interesting story.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because I used to be like the young like up and comer Magic player type person, and now
We
I'm just
all
the
were, we
old
all were.
guy. Yeah, now I'm just the old guy who's been around forever. Um, but yeah, no, I started in like 2012 trying to like do the SCG tour stuff, and yeah, it was a way different experience. Like I always wanted to like play on the pro tour and like reach that level of success, but for me, I was never really sure if that would happen or not, and
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of awesome to um, kind of be able to get better over time, I guess you could say, because I feel like a lot of people are just really incredibly naturally talented at Magic, and they just kind of immediately shoot to the top, and they just start doing really well right off the bat. But for me, like that was never the case. Like I started out playing on the SCG tour, and I wasn't doing that well, and then I got better, and I started making top eights, and then I got better, and I started top eighting Grand Prix, and like it was kind of a step-by-step process that took a long time for me to actually perform well.
Do you think that's an actually like advantage overall for you? Because as you said, a lot of the people just like have the natural talent and they like maybe top eight the pro tour on like one of their first pro tours, and they just like do really well at Grand Prix, but then after like 2 years you don't really hear about them. But for you, there was like a very long process, but over the time you just kind of like understood everything about Magic, and like maybe it took a longer time to get there, but maybe because of that, like you because of your persistence, in the end you actually get there. Do you think that was like an advantage for you, or like what do you think about that?
I think in some ways it was because I honestly think that I was more accustomed to losing than a lot of people were. Like, because I just have done it so much of it that I was used to the frustration of going a long time without doing well, or um, just all those things about Magic that if you play the game long enough, you're gonna go a year where you suck or whatever, or like it just happens to everyone. Even like Paulo's
Yeah,
arguably the
even
best
Paulo
player
was a
right now.
silver for like one of the years. Like
Yeah.
in like the 10 years of his domination, there was a year where he actually ended up silver, so it does happen to everyone, yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, he's arguably one of the best players, maybe even the best player right now, and he even had a bad year. So, like, it just happens to everyone. I feel like some of the people who just immediately shoot to the top, they kind of just expect to just keep winning the way that they've been winning, and then when it doesn't happen, sometimes they burn out. And I feel like that never happened for me in the same way because it took so long for me to get there that I was already used to like having a bad season or whatever. So
yeah, so even if you were like maybe not doing that well, you just kept trying because you just like were used to that, or
yeah, I mean it still sucks to have a bad season,
yeah, of
but
course.
yeah, I feel like I definitely had more, I don't know, experience with different levels of Magic in that regard.
Were you always like shooting for, even though maybe you weren't doing that well, were you always like trying to reach the top, or did you just like enjoy playing Magic so much that you just like played it anyway and then eventually it happened, or were you just like always, well, fuck it, I'm just not gonna give up, like I'm just gonna get there, like which one was it?
I think for me it was more. I mean, it was kind of a little bit of both, I guess you could say. But for me, it was more that I loved the game, and when I found a game that I loved as much as Magic, I just wanted to be the best that I could at it. And to me, that was really enjoyable to have this game where no matter how much time I put into it or no matter how much effort I put into it, there's always another level for me to reach beyond where I'm at. Like a lot of games you play, it's like, okay, after a certain amount of time, like you can't really get any better at them. But I don't really think that Magic is like that. So to me, that was really appealing. And I just wanted to like see how good I could get at the game, but at the same time, how well I was doing and whether I was like, being able to make it into the pro scene or any of that stuff was kind of a way to gauge how well I was doing as well. So I was trying to do that too, but mostly it was like the love of the game and trying to do the best I could at it.
Yeah, so like for example, for myself, I'm not from Europe, so like we don't really have a series like SCG here in Europe. Do you think that even if that didn't exist, you would still like try really hard to like maybe just like play all the GPs and stuff, or like how big of an influence did the Star City Games Opens and stuff like play in your career?
I think it played a huge influence. I mean, I was playing GPs at the same time that I was doing the SCG stuff. I didn't play as many of them, but I did play some of them. And I think if it hadn't been for the SCG Tour kind of giving me a chance to like have a platform as a writer, kind of grow some Twitter following and some of that kind of stuff. Like I think having that and growing that alongside with playing the game, those two kind of fed off of each other to help me to try to strive for more. And I think if it had just been GPs where I was going to GPs and going 10-5 or whatever, which is what I was doing a lot of during those years too. It just didn't get as much.
You don't have to tell me about that. I had my fair share of that.
So I was going to those GPs, but if I had just been doing that and I never did well and stuff like that, I might have given up on it. So I do think that the SCG Tour played like a massive role in that. Just having a consistent series where I could just play Magic every weekend. I mean, it also helped me get a lot better at the game too. Like there was, like I went from never having played Legacy format before and then playing it every single weekend at SCG Opens for years. Like suddenly I was really good at this format that before I would have never even tried to play because I thought like it was too much, like the two old cards I'd never played with. I didn't know how any of the cards were. I probably would have never even tried to play it if it wasn't on the SCG Tour. So
yeah, I think that this is like a super interesting thing about Magic, because on one hand, when you're like, young and super hungry, you're like more sharp and stuff, but Magic is so contextual that if you just play a lot of like maybe certain format or just like a lot of Magic in general, you just like understand certain things more and more. So like What do you think about that? Do you think that you used to be maybe a better player when you were younger, or like as you get older, are you becoming better because you just have more experience and you just like, all the situations you just been in that before, so you just know that, oh, when this happens, I should maybe scry first before drawing a card or whatever, like all these things. Like, what do you think about that?
I think I think I am a better player now than I ever was back then. Um, for a lot of the reasons that you're saying. Like, I think that you kind of learn some aspects of how the game works on a fundamental level
Yeah.
that aren't obvious when you first start playing. And I wouldn't even say they're obvious like a couple years into playing.
Yeah, I definitely
It's
know
just,
what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, it's just things that you just pick up on over a long enough time, a long enough repetition of the game. Just nature of how things work. And I mean, even now, I think I am way better at thinking about like how two decks will play out in terms of a matchup than I ever was back then. Even though, like I'm older now and my processing is slower and all that stuff that comes with that. Like I still think I'm better at Magic just because I understand the game better, even if I'm like a worse like player. I mean, if I understood the game then how I do now, I would have been way better back then, but
Mhm.
I didn't, so.
Yeah, I definitely had the same experience. Like, for example, right now, I'm not playing as much Magic as I was maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. So obviously, those 4 years ago, that at that specific time I was better, but if I spend it like 10 hours a day for 2 weeks now, because of those 4 more years of experience, I think I would be better just because I have like more experience, more fundamental understanding of the game. So if I actually decide to put in that time, that experience overrides the sharpness or whatever. So yeah, I think what you're saying makes sense. um yeah, I wanted to ask about Brad Nelson because you're like connected to Brad Nelson a lot. Do you even like live with each other? Is that the case right now?
Yeah, we live in the same house right now in Seattle area.
Yeah, so like how did that relationship happen? Because when I was like starting following competitive Magic, like I think it was like 10 years ago. I was like 16 or whatever. Brad was crushing everyone, but I didn't really know about you. But then all of a sudden, you just like became like the best bros or whatever. You were testing together. You just were talking to each other all the time. You even have a podcast right now together. So how did it all like started?
So it all started. So I lived in Virginia, which is where Star City Games is. Just I went to college there. I've lived in Virginia my entire life. That's just where I lived. But Brad ended up moving there for SCG because he was starting. He was doing like the Versus series that was
Yeah,
new.
I actually
Um,
talked to Corey a couple days ago, and he said he moved there, and he basically took Brad's job. So I know a little bit about it. Before that, I had like no idea about Virginia, but now I know a little bit, I guess.
That is true. Yeah, Corey now lives there and took Brad's job, but Brad moved away. I don't know. It's a weird thing, but yeah, Brad ended up moving there to take that job, and I lived there, and so um, like I started going to tournaments with them. Like it was Todd Anderson, Brad, Jerry Thompson for some periods of time was also there as well. And I was kind of one of like the like I guess like local pro type people that
Yeah, I
like
know what you mean. Yeah.
yeah like I would do well at all the local events at the store and stuff like that. And I wanted to do bigger things in Magic, not like from a self branding perspective, but like I just wanted to like play in bigger tournaments and like try to do better. So I kind of attached myself with that group to go to tournaments with them and test with them and try to do better with them and stuff. And it kind of just kept growing from there, where, we had a lot of things where like different teams fell apart, different like stuff happened with in regards to testing for tournaments and stuff. But I feel like Brad and I had a very similar approach and interest when it came to Magic, so we just kind of kept reconnecting back together, even if like the groups around us would fall apart or the teams around us would break apart. Like we would end up somehow, like sometimes we wouldn't even test together for a while, and then we'd come back together again for another team later on and stuff. And it eventually just got to the point where we started to get really good at like understanding each other and each other's strengths and weaknesses when it comes to that kind of stuff. And then once we did that, like we were just a really good team when it came to that stuff, and that's kind of how it all played out, I guess.
Do you think that maybe even until this day, Brad has like a big influence on how well you play, or is that like long, long past, or what do you think about that?
I don't know if Brad has definitely impacted. I don't know if how well I play in any individual event, but because a lot of times Brad and I don't even play the same decks. Like we have different philosophies on the kinds of strategies we like to play, and sometimes even different philosophies on what decks we think are good. But I think Brad has really changed like how I view Magic as a game. In a lot of ways, like he was really instrumental in helping me level up as a player in terms of understanding like how two decks will play against each other in a matchup, and like how one should try to sideboard for a matchup and all that kind of stuff. Like I think Brad is
He's
one of
insane
the
at
best.
sideboarding. I didn't mention that, but me, Brian, and Brad were like in the same team for about a year. I think it's like 3 years ago or something. And like the one thing that I learned is like, Brad is just like really good in sideboarding, and when he's testing, for the most part, he's just trying to figure out how he should sideboard against like certain decks and stuff, rather than just like figure out how to play the main deck or whatever. Like the main focus in, or just like how you should sideboard basically.
Yeah, I mean it revolutionized how I looked at it, because I used to just be like, all right, this is my deck, and then here are some sideboard cards that are really good, and I'm going to bring those in when I think that they're good. But he kind of taught me to look at it as like, it's like, okay, here's my deck against this deck. Here's my deck against this deck. Instead of just thinking of it as a deck, you think of it as a deck like in regards to all the other decks, not on its own merits or whatever. I don't know.
I understand what you're saying, but
yeah,
maybe some of the watchers aren't, so maybe you should go more into the deep to explain it more.
Yeah, so it's really easy to look at a deck as like, okay, here's 60 cards that makes up my deck, and here's 15 cards that make up my sideboard, and like I'm gonna go play against this matchup, and it's like, well, these cards aren't good, so I don't want them. And then like, let's look at what I have in my sideboard. It's like, oh, maybe like I guess these are the best options in my sideboard. I just have these 4 removal spells. I'll bring those in against this creature deck because it's removal that's good against creatures and that kind of stuff. And that's how a lot of people look at sideboarding. But Brad looked at sideboarding on a way deeper level, where it was about kind of a fluid thing where you're looking at it as, okay, what do I want my exact 75 cards to be for this particular matchup? Because you have to also look at it from what your opponent is going to sideboard. So a lot of times you're like, okay, like I'm playing against this creature deck, and my deck doesn't have enough removal in it, so I need to add removal spells to my sideboard. So I have 4 Doom Blades on my sideboard, and I'll bring those in anytime I play a creature deck. But you have to think about this creature deck's going to be like, okay, well, this guy's going to bring in 4 Doom Blades against me. I'm going to bring in Planeswalkers. And so now all of a sudden your sideboard plan isn't actually that good against their sideboard plan, because you're only sideboarding for their main deck. And that kind of stuff. And that's just on a deeper level than I was able to look at it. And he also does things where it's like, okay, here's the 6 major matchups in the format. What is the 60 cards that you want against every one of these major matchups, and how is it possible to construct your deck, main deck and sideboard, such that you have access to those 60 cards for every matchup? And sometimes that means you're main decking a sideboard card, and sometimes that means you have to find a different card than the one you would normally play for a matchup, because that card can also be used in other matchups, and you need that versatility. There's a lot to it that goes beyond the basics of it. So
yeah, it sometimes leads to the sideboards where there is just like a card in a sideboard that just like seems super weird. Maybe it's like a card that you would normally see main deck, but it just like shows a lot of the matchups. Like you just know that your setup after board looks certain way, and you just like need your those extra like 2-offs or whatever to like make your setup post board really good again in all the matchups. And that's why it makes sense. But you know, when you just look at the deck list and you just see that card in the board, it just like seems super weird. So you know, what you described kind of explains why that happens. So thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem.
You're currently in the MPL. What do you think about Magic right now? Or currently, we don't really play any tournaments real life. I personally, I mean, I'm fine with playing online, but I always, until like, you know, this point, I always perceived it as like a way to practice. But like the main reason why I liked Magic was just to play the real cards. Not only that it's just like more fun to actually hold the cards, but it's just like a slightly different game. You know, your opponent does things physically in a certain way and you can get a read, or you personally can do things in a certain way, like maybe you tap the mana in a certain way, or you just like look at your opponent in a certain way, and it's just like a slightly different game. And I think some players are better in one than the other. What do you think about that? Like, do you like just playing online? Do you think it sucks? Like, what do you think about that?
I feel like not playing in paper has kind of disconnected me a lot from Magic, because, and I would have never thought that, because I always played a ton of Magic online. I played a ton of Arena too. I enjoy playing online, but it is way different than playing in tournaments. And I guess so much of what has kept me playing Magic for so long is like the community aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like there's that's kind of gone away a lot this past year without there being physical tournaments and stuff. So I do feel really disconnected from all that. And I do think it is a way different game played in paper versus online.
Yeah.
For a variety of aspects.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I enjoy both. Like, I don't really have a problem with either form of playing the game. But yeah, it is way different skills, and it's just way different. And like, I just think the lack of interpersonal connections that come from just playing Magic constantly online versus playing against people in paper. I don't know, it loses a little bit of appeal. Like, I don't feel like you can play as much online Magic over a long enough period of time without... I think you burn out faster, I guess I should say.
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean. I experienced the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. What do you think about future? Like, for example, if the real tournaments won't become happening soon enough, like, do you think you will be like, oh, well, this is not really what I signed up for. I'm okay with doing this online thing for a couple of years, but my real love is the real Magic. If it doesn't come back, like, I don't really want to do this. Or maybe that's not the case. Like you know, how are you approaching that?
I don't know. Like, I kind of think that I'm on the like tail end of my Magic playing. Where I think that I probably won't play.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but to be fair, from my understanding, most of the pros or even like the more competitive players always think that, like, you know, even when I was like 19, 22 or whatever, I always thought that like, you know, this is like my peak or whatever. I'm just gonna like stop playing right after this, and then it just like like the end never comes. So like, I'm not really sure if that's the right approach to take, but.
No, I agree with you on that. I mean, I don't feel like I ever felt that way, though. I mean, maybe I felt that way about my peak in Magic, but I never felt that way about my desire to play or my enjoyment of the game. And I feel like those have really gone down a lot, to the point where, like, I would be okay, like, you know, ending my career at some point soon. So I do think that I'm on, like, I don't know, the tail end of that. But who knows, like, you know, what you're saying is true. Everyone always says that, and then you win some tournament and you're back in again. So, you know, who knows what will happen in a year or two. Like, I don't want to make definitive statements like that, but I honestly, I don't even think it has to do with paper versus online as much. I think for me it's just the community aspect of the game. I feel like I've kind of like no longer have a connection with the community as much as I used to before.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely feel the same.
And to me, like, I never realized. It was kind of one of those things where like you never realized what you had until it was gone type thing. But I never really realized how much that meant to me or how big of an impact that was for me until I kind of felt like I didn't have it anymore. And now I realized like that was a large part of what kept me interested in Magic. So.
Yeah, it's definitely true that like if you go to these tournaments, like maybe the GP that you go to doesn't even like matter that much, but you like see all the people, maybe like a couple guys show up and tell you that they really look up to you or whatever, and you just like go to a dinner with your friends. It's definitely more encouraging for you to like, you know, continue to keep trying compared to just like sitting at home and just grinding out arena and hoping to do well. It's just like a very different experience.
Yeah, if you go to 3 GPs and you do poorly, but you have a fun time with your friends, that's way different than playing 3 tournaments online, doing poorly, and then you're like, what's going on?
Yeah, like what am I even doing here? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So like one last thing I would like to talk about here. We it's kind of random that I started talking to it, about it at the end, but I think it's like very important, so I should talk about it. You became the world champion, I think it's like 2 or 3 years ago. And I just wanted to ask about that. Like, you were one of the 2 silver players in the tournament. It was you and Marcio Carvalho. Or maybe gold. I think it was gold.
We were
I'm
we
sorry.
were gold,
Yeah. So it was basically just platinums and Hall of Famers and 2 gold players, and they both faced in the finals. And you ended up winning. What did that mean to you? Like, that just has to be insane. I obviously never experienced a success on that level, so I can't really relate. But you know, can you maybe talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, I mean that win meant like I know it's cheesy to say, but it kind of meant everything to me because I had been working so long at Magic and I had never really experienced major success in any way. You know, I never top 8 at a pro tour. I never even come close, honestly. And so to go into that tournament as a huge underdog like that against, you know, I was one of only 2 gold pros. Everyone there was like, you know, these insane Magic figures that have been around forever, and that, you know, I play them in tournaments and they kick my ass all the time. You know, like that's who's in this tournament. So. Being able to win that and just have like that as something to be like, look, I've kind of made it in Magic. I guess I kind of
all of you.
It.
Maybe I got lucky, but I won. So
exactly. It doesn't matter if I got lucky or not.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I still was able to win. So, no, that was
to
really
be fair,
awesome
to be fair, I actually watched the finals a couple days ago, and I think you played really, really well. So just wanted to point it out.
Yeah, and it was weird for me because I actually felt that entire season I had leveled up as a player too. And I don't, you know, obviously I got incredibly lucky. You have to get incredibly lucky to win a tournament like that. So there was clearly there was luck involved in that tournament win. But I also do think I played well. And I thought that I had been playing well like that entire year because I had been going to Grand Prix all year, and like, I mean, that's how I qualified for Worlds, was doing well in all the Grand Prix, and some amount of that was just playing in all of them. You know, like the more you play, the more points you're going to accumulate just by, if I play an extra 10 Grand Prix over somebody else, I'm probably going to get more points than them, even if they're doing a little bit better. But even looking back at that year afterwards, like I had one of the top 10 Grand Prix win percentage rates of all time that season. So I was, even though I was playing a lot of Grand Prix, I was also winning a lot in them too. And I feel like I was just in tune. I
actually lost to you in Australia when, like, at that GP, if you did well, you were like locked for the Worlds.
Yeah.
So I actually helped you to win the World Championship. Just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. I appreciate your sacrifice.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty. You went. I also watched that a couple of days ago as well. I don't know why. I guess I just wrote Brian Duin to YouTube because I was about to make a video with you, and I found a match against myself, and you went the free mana of 1/1 that when you emerge it, you make a guy and it like does all the things, and you went that into the turn 4 like an uncommon guy, and I just got completely fucked. So
Yeah,
it wasn't very
like
interesting.
foul emissary. I
Yeah,
think
or
is what it
whatever.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that deck vividly because I remember if I 3-0'd with that deck, I made the top 8 and then I locked it. But I
Yeah.
ended up losing the last round of that to miss top 8, and then I needed Seth Manfield to not get exactly first place, and he of course top 8'd the tournament,
Yeah,
and
of
he
course.
was starting to win. I'm like, come on! Like all I needed was Seth to not get exactly first place in this tournament, but he ended up losing in the semifinals, so
That's good.
all panned out.
Okay, I think we talked for more than enough. If there's like anything else you would like to say or maybe talk about, now is the time. So,
I mean, I don't know. I don't have anything offhand, so
all right. If that's good enough for you, I'm fine.
it's good enough for me.
All right. Thanks very much for taking your time to talk with me. It's been a pleasure. I'm really glad that you took this time because you could easily say no. So I'm glad that you said yes. So thank you for that.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. It was fun.
All right. Maybe if Corona goes away soon, we will see each other in future tournaments. But I wish you the best for the future and see ya.
You too. Thanks.